bustling department store in one of the largest cities in the world. 1,500 people are crowded inside the building. Suddenly, an explosion erupts from the top floor. In less than 20 seconds, the entire store crashes to the ground. In its place lies a massive pile of twisted steel and concrete. Over 500 people are dead. The tragedy stuns a nation, and the public demand answers. Now, one man must find out what caused this catastrophe. What he discovers will shake an entire country to its very foundations. Disasters don't just happen. They're a chain of critical events. Unravel the clues and count down those final seconds from disaster. "1,500 people are crushed under 42,000 tons of rubble. On the surface, there is chaos. 10 meters down, a young girl is buried alive. For her, the horror has only just begun. South Korea, Seoul, 1995. It's a hot summer in this booming capital city. In less than a decade, the country has transformed itself into one of the world's largest economies. The sudden wealth has led to a massive increase in construction. In Seoul, at least 10 high-rise buildings go up every week. But a shadow looms over this nation. Its neighbor, North Korea, lies just 40 kilometers from the capital. Close enough to put Seoul within range of artillery shells from one of the last surviving hardline communist countries. The relationship between the two has long been violent. In 1983, North Korean militants detonated a bomb, killing 17 South Korean officials. 4 years later, the communists are accused of destroying a South Korean airliner in mid-flight, killing 115. June 29th, it's 7 a.m. Seoul's 10 million residents start another busy day. Amongst them is 19-year-old Park Seong-hyun. Park's dream is to be a schoolteacher. In order to pay for her tuition fees, she works as a shop assistant. This evening, Park plans to meet her best friend, Sohee-jin. The two women have known each other since they were 4.
Park was like a sister to me. She was very outgoing and very kind. We had planned to meet in a coffee shop after she finished work.
Park works in the Sampoon Superstore, one of the most prestigious and exclusive retail outlets in South Korea. The building employs 1,000 staff, serving 40,000 customers every day. It turns over the equivalent of $4 million a week and sells everything from the latest electrical gadgetry to designer fashion. Built in the late 80s from reinforced concrete, the complex has 4 basement levels and 5 stories above ground. It stands on 15,000 square meters of real estate in the city's exclusive Gangnam district. The area was once a landfill site and the city's waste dump. Now, in a remarkable turnaround, it's one of Seoul's most affluent areas. Just after 8 a.m., Yong-Cho Lee, the store's facility manager, starts his day. He's a busy man, and his first job is to investigate a note left on his desk by the night watchman. In the early hours of the morning, the night watchman heard strange noises coming from the roof. The roof is cracked, But Lee knows that this was caused when some air conditioning units were moved 2 years ago. Building safety is a major concern in South Korea. The country has recently been shocked by several appalling tragedies. 2 gas explosions and a bridge collapse have killed nearly 150 people. In all 3 cases, poor building practices were to blame. In the aftermath, the nation started to question the price of their economic growth. To restore confidence, the state puts into place a series of rigorous inspections for all public buildings. Sampoon's just passed its regular safety inspection. It's 10:02 a.m. Park is already busy at work in the children's clothing department.
감사합니다. 안녕히 가세요.
Over in the household section, another young woman, Yu Ji-hwan, is running late.
네, 너무 막힌.
This is her first job since leaving school. And like many a teenager, she'd much rather be doing something else.
일하는 거 재밌는 사람 많이 없잖아요.
Being a sales assistant's boring.
어찌됐든 서 있는 거니까 힘들고.
It's tiring standing for so many hours.
하는 거잖아요.
Park and Yu work on the same floor, basement level 1. 5 stories above them, on the top floor, there are 8 restaurants. One of these is the Chunwon restaurant. It's popular for its traditional Korean dishes. Inside, facilities manager Mr. Lee is dealing with another problem. A large crack has appeared around one of the columns, and the floor looks buckled at the base. Lee takes decisive action and closes the restaurant. Construction signs are put up, and access to the area is blocked off. Lee knows that gossip spreads quickly in Sampoon, so he cautions the restaurant's workers to say nothing. As midday approaches, the store gets busy. Then customers on the 4th floor hear a disturbing sound. Once again, Mr. Lee goes to investigate. Down in basement level 1, Yu starts to feel the building vibrate.
Maybe I'm a bit foolish, but I don't sense that there's anything wrong.
12:30 p.m. Mr. Lee thinks the air conditioning units may be causing the vibrations. To be prudent, he switches off the air conditioning for the entire building. An announcement is made telling shoppers the air conditioning is under repair and will be turned off for the remainder of the day. As the temperature reaches nearly 27 degrees Celsius, shoppers start to complain.
Customers are getting angry. Why does a prestigious store like Sampoon not have working air conditioning?
Behind the scenes, facility manager Mr. Lee briefs the Superstore's owner about the cracks in the restaurant. Lee explains that the cracks have widened to 10 centimeters since the morning. Also present is Hak-soo Lee, the structural engineer. Soo Lee built the complex, and he recommends closing the store and carrying out urgent repairs. The owner refuses. He is adamant that the store stay open so shopping can continue. Beneath the restaurants, on the 4th floor, there is now widespread concern. Workers are worried that something is seriously wrong. Facility manager Mr. Lee attempts to reassure the staff, but rumors that the building has a problem are spreading. Then, at 5:40 p.m., a loud bang is heard from the top floor. This time, the ceiling shifts. Unknown to Park, Yu, and more than 1,500 other people, the building is on the edge of catastrophe. At 5:47 p.m., an even louder bang is heard from the top floor. But 5 stories below, Yu and her co-workers feel nothing. A massive blast rocks the entire building. Emergency alarms are immediately set off. On the upper floors, staff and customers panic and run for the exits. The 5-story Superstore finally gives way. In less than 20 seconds, the building crashes to the ground. As the dust clears, it is evident that the entire Superstore has collapsed. What was once a symbol of Seoul's economic prosperity is now just a massive pile of twisted steel and concrete. Smoke is seeping from the wreckage, and 1,500 people lie trapped. Within minutes, rescue teams, police and fire crews frantically start to drag the dead and injured free of the wreckage. Television crews start broadcasting the horror live to the nation. South Korea has never witnessed a peacetime tragedy on this scale before. It is immediately clear the death toll will be massive. The disaster site is a scene of utter chaos. Grief-stricken relatives and friends desperately search for survivors. Among them is Park's lifelong friend, So Hee-jin. The two were supposed to meet this evening.
I am shocked. So many injured and bleeding. The dead being carried away.
So knows that her best friend must be somewhere in the collapsed building.
I start scrambling at the rubble with my hands. I keep digging. I don't know why I'm doing it. I just need to do something.
10 meters below So, underneath thousands of tons of rubble, is the remains of what was once basement level 1. There, in a space half the size of a telephone kiosk, lies Yu Ji-hwan. She's badly injured, but incredibly, she's still alive.
이마에 막 손가락 들어가고.
I can feel a hole in my head so large my finger can go through it. That's how big it is.
그냥 이렇게 한 요 정도 작게 엄지손.
And I can feel something squiggly in a cut on my back like my intestine.
이게 다 몸이 놀래.
I don't want to die.
그런가 봐요. 몸이 자체가.
The scale of the rescue operation is massive. 1,000 rescue workers and volunteers desperately try to free the bodies from the wreckage. By nightfall, more than 30 cranes and diggers arrive to speed up the rescue. They start carefully removing huge slabs of debris. By early next morning, over 200 people have been brought out alive. Meters below, oblivious to the commotion above her, Yu Ji-hwan has no idea of the danger she is in.
깔끔하게 폭삭 딱이었거든. 근데 그때 제가 생각했지.
As I look around, I think it's just a wall that's collapsed on me.
참황당한 게 그 사람.
I try calling out, but there's no answer.
안에 무슨 컵.
I think it's just me who's stuck here.
A day after the collapse, the confirmed dead stands at 44, with more than 600 others missing. Thousands of tons of concrete and steel hang dangerously over the site. Many willingly risk their lives to free victims from the wreckage. The north face of the building is tilting perilously and looks like it may fall at any moment. By the end of the second day, the danger is just too great, and officials are forced into a terrible decision: to abandon the search for survivors. More than 500 relatives take to the street. They plead with officials to resume the rescue. In the protest, scuffles break out with riot police. Calling off the search now would be a death sentence for you and countless others trapped in the wreckage. A massive rescue effort has stalled at the site where the Sampoon Superstore once stood. Desperate relatives demand that the search resume. By the morning of the third day, engineers stabilize the north wing with cables, and the rescue operation starts once again. Within hours, a young woman is extracted from the wreckage, but it's not Yu Ji-hwan. Exhausted and bleeding, the survivor is rushed to hospital. She dies later that day. For you, trapped for over 72 hours, her chances of survival are falling.
모진 소리를 했다? 그거 다 생각이 나고.
I think a lot about the short life I have had. All of those close to me, my friends, and especially my mother.
Each day, relatives gather to identify the corpses freed from the wreckage. It's a gruesome business. Park Sen-hyun's friend So is there. She sees a photo that strikes fear in her heart.
The picture shows a decapitated corpse. It is wearing the same ring Park had on. I pray it is not her.
But at the hospital, So discovers the ring is different. The corpse is not her friend.
It's so good when I realize it isn't Park. I know she could still be alive.
On day 4, the death toll reaches 107. But still, rescue workers know many more are missing. As the days go by, the rubble is constantly compressing, crushing those trapped inside. The wall above you is now just centimeters from her face. By chance, she finds a knife beside her.
I think about killing myself. I can't take the horror anymore. But then I realize that actually it's very easy to become very selfish and not think of the effect it would have on the people I love.
Day after day passes as body after crushed body is found. Then after a week, the authorities decide there is little hope. Without water, a person can only survive for about 3 days in 30-degree heat. For relatives, the announcement is a desperate blow. The rescue effort turns into a recovery operation. Heavy machinery moves in to clear the tons of rubble from the disaster site. Another 5 days go by, and nearly 21,000 tons of wreckage are cleared. Then, just after 3:30 in the afternoon, 12 days after the collapse, there is an astonishing discovery.
Around by my foot, suddenly it just opens up. There is a hole.
Yu Ji-hwan is found, alive.
And I can hear a voice asking, "Is there someone in there?"
Yu has survived, trapped in a space barely larger than her body. In all, she has spent 285 hours in searing heat drinking rainwater to keep her alive.
행복한 거에
I can't really explain it, but it's just happiness.
걱정, 근심을 날려버린 그런 기분.
I feel like I'm flying,
근데 뭐라 그래?
that I'm freed from everything.
나왔고 이제 내 소재도 알고 내가 누군지도 다
Everyone knows who I am.
사람들이 어찌됐든.
And even if I die now, everything I've worried about has been taken away.
솔직히 죽어도 이제는 더.
Yu is rushed to hospital and put into intensive care. She has lost more than 10% of her body weight, but her other injuries turn out to be relatively minor. In total, 937 people are seriously injured. But amidst the wreckage, 502 are dead. Tears turn to anger. Why did a modern reinforced concrete building that had stood for over 6 years collapse? What kind of catastrophe could raze it to the ground in less than 20 seconds? And who, if anyone, is to blame? Now, by rewinding the events of that day and by going deep into the investigation, we can reveal exactly what caused the worst building collapse in the history of South Korea. Within an hour of the disaster, the prosecution office orders a full-scale inquiry. And there's only one man for the job. Lan Chung is the professor of civil and structural engineering at Danguk University. His knowledge of South Korea's construction industry is unsurpassed. But as Professor Chung arrives at the disaster site, he is not prepared for what he sees.
It's impossible to describe what I feel. So many people are crushed in the rubble. It's a huge shock.
He must resist the temptation to jump to conclusions, but straight away one theory looks more than likely. Sampoon could be the latest in a string of gas-related disasters. In the last 8 months, South Korea has been rocked by 2 massive explosions caused by leaking gas. The most recent was at Daegu subway in Seoul. The blast killed over 100 people and injured 140 more. The scenes look all too familiar.
I'm 80 to 90% sure a gas explosion is responsible for this disaster.
Chung orders his team to find out if the Superstore had a history of gas leaks. What they uncover is alarming. Just 3 months ago, a high-pressure blowout took place inside the building. Luckily, the gas supply was shut off in time, and a disaster was narrowly avoided. It looks like Chung could be right, but he needs hard evidence. He knows one thing will prove if gas is to blame. Fire. Gas explosions have a distinctive signature. They almost always produce an inferno. But although parts of the building are ablaze, the thick smoke is not the evidence Chung needs.
The fire is not from the blast, but from gasoline burning in the cars that have been crushed in the basement.
Unable to prove the gas theory for now, Professor Chung considers a more sinister cause, a terrorist bomb.
An explosion damaging the interior columns of the building could have caused this.
North Korean militants are the obvious suspects. 2 previous bombings have killed 136 innocent people. But a terrorist attack in the heart of the capital would signal a horrifying new strategy. Investigator Professor Lan Chung examines whether the disaster at the Sampoon Superstore has been caused by a terrorist bomb. It bears a striking resemblance to another shocking event half a world away, in the USA. On April 19th, 1995, just 10 weeks ago, a terrorist bomb blew up the Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City. 168 people were murdered. Could the disaster at the Superstore be a similar case, where a bomb triggers a large-scale collapse? The two buildings were of similar construction, so is there anything to learn from the American investigation?
One of the first things I try to do is imagine how the collapse progressed, how the building got from a state standing up, ordinary state, down to a pile of rubble on the ground.
Glenn Bell has been a structural engineer for 30 years. He has investigated many high-profile building disasters, including the Oklahoma bombing. He knows that a bomb explosion has its own unique mark, a footprint that investigators call a debris field.
In the Oklahoma City bombing, we see debris was blown out sideways from the face of the building from the explosion.
The wreckage was thrown several hundred meters from the structure, forming a distinctive telltale pattern. But as Chung surveys the scene from Sampoon, he notices one striking difference. The debris was not thrown outwards. The entire structure came straight down. The pattern of collapse and lack of other evidence rules out a terrorist bomb. For Chung, it's conclusive.
An explosion would not have caused the building to collapse straight down in its entirety.
The pattern of collapse also rules out a gas explosion. Now there is only a single option left. It's a chilling prospect, one that could affect almost every large building in Seoul. Some kind of structural failure must have caused this disaster.
There is so much damage that if it wasn't an explosion, there has to be something wrong with the design of the building or a mistake in its construction.
The pressure is on Chung to solve this mystery fast. In recent months, a bridge collapsed without warning, and now a superstore has suffered a similar fate. How many other thousands of buildings and perhaps millions of lives are in danger? Has the rush to build in this booming economy left a terrible legacy? Chung begins a process of elimination. Could the material used to build the structure have been at fault? After all, substandard materials were the reason Songsu Bridge collapsed, killing 32 people. Sampoon was 100% reinforced concrete. A defect here could certainly have caused total collapse. To find out, a sample of the concrete is put under compression in a powerful hydraulic vise. It's a standard investigative test, one that Glenn Bell has performed many times.
Very strong concrete will tend to carry quite a bit of load before failure, and then it breaks in almost an explosive fashion.
But if on the other hand the concrete crumbles, then it was either mixed or formulated incorrectly. Chung waits eagerly for the results, but when they come, it's a dead end.
The results confirm that there is no problem with the strength of the concrete.
With weak concrete ruled out, Chung moves on. Now he must find out if a design flaw caused the building to collapse. The drawings used to build the superstore should reveal all.
The drawings show the superstore was built using a technique called flat slab construction.
Flat slab construction is a common way to build multi-story buildings. Concrete columns support the weight of each level, and for extra strength, steel bars are cast inside each one. More steel is used inside the floor slabs to strengthen them too. So far, all is well.
I can find nothing strange from the drawings to suggest that poor design caused this disaster.
Although there's nothing wrong with the basic concept, Chung knows the architect's original drawings are only half the picture. To actually build the structure, an engineer must calculate the size of the columns and slabs required. This information is then fed back into the final design. Trained investigators know that this last phase is where mistakes can be made. As Chung compares the engineer's calculations with architect's drawings, he finds a disturbing discrepancy.
구조 계산서에 구조 캘큘레이션에 나와 있는
I notice the diameter of the columns is reduced on the drawings. When I see this, I immediately know something is seriously wrong.
축소가 돼 있었던 거예요.
The engineer worked out that the columns needed to be 80 centimeters in diameter. On the drawings, they are only 60. The key question now is how was the building actually constructed? Could it simply be a mistake on the drawing board? The only way for Chung to find out for sure is to go back to the scene and measure the actual columns. At the disaster site, he confirms his worst fears.
계산서에 80으로 돼 있던 기둥이
The diameter of the columns has been reduced to 60 centimeters.
확인할 수 있었는데
This reduction in width is worrying, but Chung discovers an even more shocking flaw. There should be 16 steel bars reinforcing the concrete columns, but in reality, there are only 8. Chung calculates the effect this would have had on the structure and is stunned.
4분의 3의 스퀘어.
When I calculate the effect of the reduction, it shows Sampung's interior strength is reduced by nearly half.
되는 것이고.
Although the finding is worrying, it's by no means the answer to the mystery. Even with almost half its support strength gone, standard engineering practice would have ensured that the building was safe.
Every building is designed to have a safety tolerance. We build in a margin of safety to protect the structure, but more importantly, to protect the people from harm.
Sampung was engineered to be 2.5 times stronger than needed. Even though the mix-up over the column dimensions had reduced this by half, there is still a healthy safety margin. There must be something else. Chung orders his investigation team back to the disaster site to look for more clues. Now they find a third shocking error. The reinforcing steel bars that strengthen the concrete floor slabs are in the wrong place. They should be 5 centimeters from the top of the slab, but in fact, the distance is 10 centimeters. This tiny detail is of crucial importance.
The repositioning of the steel by about 5 centimeters may not sound like very much to the layperson, but it's critical because effective lowering the steel is very much like making the slab thinner.
This mistake weakens the slab by 20% at the most vital part of the building, the point where the floors connect to the columns and the stress is transferred to the ground. It's still not enough to bring about a collapse, but the errors are adding up. They point to a systematic disregard for building regulations. Chung directs his suspicion towards Sampung's managers, all of whom survived the collapse. South Korean law enables the prosecutor's office to arrest the owner, chief architect, CEO, and facilities executive under suspicion of professional negligence. They are paraded on television. Then Professor Chung interrogates them.
증인들은 이제 우리가 조사하는데 아주
Talking to these witnesses is very important. I need to understand the history of the complex.
구분해 볼 수가 있습니다.
Chung discovers that the Superstore was originally designed to have only 4 floors above ground. But halfway through construction, the management decided they wanted more space and demanded a 5th level to be built. The construction company refused, saying the structure would not support another floor. The contractors were fired. The management then hired its own in-house construction company to finish the job. It's an extraordinary example of how commercial pressures in Seoul's booming economy are riding roughshod over all other considerations. Next, Chung calls in the building's facility manager, Mr. Lee. Lee has even worse to tell. He explains that the controversial fifth floor was originally conceived as a roller skate rink. But late in construction, the management changed their minds again and decided they wanted the floor to house 8 restaurants. This seemingly innocuous detail is vital. In Korea, diners traditionally sit on the floor, and so restaurants install underfloor heating. To fit this heating, the floor must be thickened, which adds to its weight.
As soon as I know the roller skate rink was changed to a restaurant floor, I know the building was in trouble.
Chung works out that installing the underfloor heating must have put yet more stress on the vital connections on the 5th floor. Mr. Lee confirms that they were under enormous stress. Lee had seen the cracks with his own eyes and had photos taken.
Mr. Lee tells me about a problem on the morning of the collapse. A pillar in one of the restaurants had a crack around the base of it, the size of a man's fist.
By checking the plans, Chung places the cracks at column 5E in the Chunwon restaurant. His expert eye can tell the slab has completely separated from the pillar, with only the reinforcing steel holding it together. The trail is getting warmer, but even this is not enough to account for the disaster that cost so many lives. There is one factor that Chung simply cannot ignore. The building stood for a full 6 years. Something must have happened after the building was completed. Something that must have pushed it over the edge.
There always exists a critical point. If you go beyond that point, the building collapses.
Chung orders his team to scrutinize the building's history. It's painstaking work, where even the slightest anomaly can count.
It can take a long time for a building to reach the critical point before it collapses. But then sometimes you just need a drop of water, one drop of water, and the destruction starts.
Finally, Chung gets a lead. 2 years before the collapse, 3 large air conditioning units situated on the roof had been moved. Neighbors on the east side had complained that they were too noisy. This could be Chung's missing link. Again, he quizzes facility manager Mr. Lee.
The facilities manager confirms the air conditioning towers were moved. He has photographs showing this.
Again, the photographs reveal cracks on the roof. But it's how the units were moved that grabs Chung's interest.
Mr. Lee tells me that the air conditioning units had been dragged across the roof. This is very worrying.
This latest detail is extraordinary. It provides the key to exactly how the building collapsed. And as a direct result, Professor Chung's investigation will call into question the safety of almost every building in South Korea. Investigator Lan Chung is close to discovering what caused the disaster at the Sampoon department store. He has found that 2 years before the collapse, 3 large air conditioning units were repositioned. They should have been lifted into their new position, but instead they were put on rollers and dragged across the roof. Dragging them was a terrible mistake and has clearly made the whole roof unstable. What's more, their weight, 15 tons each, must have overstressed the main supports. Column 5E seems to have been particularly affected. But Chung still doesn't know what triggered the collapse on June 29th.
The trigger is the final explanation of what happened, and it's most important in that it explains why the failure occurred when it did.
One piece of evidence remains unresolved. Survivors reported that the department store was vibrating on the day it collapsed. Chung finally thinks he has the answer. During the course of 2 years, every time the air conditioning is switched on, it sends vibrations across the unstable roof and ricochets down to the 5th floor. Over time, this widens the crack around column 5E until it's at breaking point.
에어컨이 가동되면서
Sampoon had become so weak that the addition of the air conditioning on the morning of June the 29th was the last drop of water that pushed it over the edge and made it collapse.
The cracked slab in the Chunwon restaurant can hold on no more. It starts to fail.
그래서 이제 드디어 붕괴가 시작돼.
That's where it started from. That's where the crack got bigger and set off the progressive collapse.
또 전층으로 이렇게.
Now, by rewinding the events leading up to that fateful day, and by following the evidence uncovered during the extensive investigation, we can finally reveal how Sampoon Superstore collapsed. 1993, 2 years before collapse. The Superstore's 3 air conditioning units are repositioned. They are put on rollers and are dragged across the roof. Cracks form in the roof slabs, and the main support columns are forced downwards. Column 5E takes a direct hit, and cracks appear at the point where the column meets the 5th floor. June 29th, 1995, just under 9 hours until disaster. Facility manager Mr. Lee is called to the Chunwon restaurant to examine a large fracture that has appeared in the floor. Unknown to Mr. Lee, vibrations from the air conditioning units are now radiating across the cracked roof and down through the column 5E to where it connects to the 5th floor slab. The fracture in the Chunwon restaurant opens up. 6 hours to disaster, and the first of several large bangs erupt from the 5th floor. The vibrations from the air conditioning units are forcing the crack to widen further. After reports that the whole building is now vibrating, Mr. Lee switches off the air conditioning. But it's too late. The crack in the Chunwon has widened to 10 centimeters. 52 minutes to disaster. Sampoon is now packed with shoppers. 20 seconds before disaster, a massive boom sends shockwaves through the building. Shoppers panic and run for their lives. The 5th floor slab around column 5E can hold on no more and finally gives way. In less than 20 seconds, the building crashes to the ground, trapping more than 1,500 people. For investigator Professor Chung, it's a chilling insight.
그리고 이제
As I carried out the investigation and smelled the rotting corpses, I couldn't help but realize what can result from mistakes. As a fellow engineer, I can't help but feel ashamed.
But in all the carnage, there is one last miracle. 16 days after the collapse, the disaster site is nearly cleared. 323 corpses have been recovered. But amazingly, beneath the rubble, one person is still alive. It's 19-year-old children's department assistant, Park Sang-hyun.
혀가 이렇게 묻어있는 상태에서 살려달라는 발음도
I hear loud machinery above my head, and I think, this is it.
처음에는 못 들었어요.
I'm going to die.
사람 있냐고, 사람 있다고 그랬고.
I start banging with all my might. The machines stop, and I hear a voice call out, "Is anybody down there?"
Park has been trapped for 377 hours in complete darkness. Incredibly, apart from a few scratches, she is unscathed.
아, 이제 살았구나. 진짜 그랬어요.
I am thinking, now I am saved.
저한테 빛이 딱 들어오면
I am going to live.
이제 살았구나. 진짜 그 말밖에 안 나왔어요.
TV crews start broadcasting the event. A nation is stunned, but none more so than so.
너무 좋았죠. 너무 좋았고
It's incredible. Incredible.
이런 생각 들었었어요. 혼자
Even though everyone around me told me she was dead, only I kept on believing until the end.
제 방에 갖다 놓고 이랬던
I can't stop crying.
그런 생각 들었었죠.
Park is taken to hospital. Her eyes covered to protect them from the light they haven't seen for so long. Her best friend, So, nurses her during her stay in hospital.
그러니까 그냥 나는 그거에 인해서 피해를 받지
Although I suffered, I just think I am very lucky to have survived.
하고 있는 거예요. 그러니까
After weeks recovering, Park finally goes home.
아무튼 저 친구가 봤을 때 되게 좋았었어요. 저 친구가
I feel so bad that Seo had suffered so much.
친구들이 그러더라고요. 저희 가족들도 그러고 저희 친척.
I really love her.
혜진이 정말 고생 많이 했다고.
Professor Chung's investigation blamed the collapse on human ignorance, negligence, and greed. On December 27th, 1995, after months of public demonstrations, June Lee, the owner of Sampoon, was jailed for 10.5 years after being found guilty of criminal negligence. His son, the CEO, was jailed for 7 years for corruption and accidental homicide. The final verdict had an enormous and lasting impact. Following further investigation, widespread corruption and fraud were discovered at Sampoon. 21 other people were found guilty, including 12 city officials. In the aftermath, a new wave of rigorous government building inspections took place across the whole country. What they uncovered was beyond belief. 1 in 7 of all high-rise structures needed rebuilding, and 4 out of 5 needed major repair work. In all, 98% of South Korea's buildings were affected. Just 1 in 50 was deemed safe.